My name is Jerome Cuson. You can find me on Twitter at JeromeC1985. You can find my colleague, as always, Brian at Brian DeBrain, also on Twitter.com. This month, we are going to be doing a very special theme. We are doing something that Matt and Ben did. So Matt and Ben did this mini-series called Punchy, Kicky Men. And we are taking that and we're using it. We're co-opting it for ourselves. I guess in some ways, no, I'm not going to go there. We are taking this for ourselves, and we are doing Punchy Kicky Woman. And our theme this month is going to be examining the career of Michelle Yeoh. If you would like to find us, if you would like to rate us, please do so on Apple and Spotify. Make sure you leave a 4 or 5-star review to help us as we are endeavoring now on our own. We have our own feed separate from the real world, but definitely continue to support the real world and all the podcasts that are being done over there as well. But yes, definitely leave that 4 or 5-star review for our podcast, specifically here at both Pantheon Plus and Superhero Pantheon whenever we get the itch once again to be talking about superhero movies. Now, we are going to be talking about Michelle Yeoh, but we are going to be having a very particular focus because it would be very easy for us to look at her filmography and pick out some of her more famous works. I'm talking about, Tomorrow Never Dies, when I think most American audiences saw her for the first time, but I know that Brian and I are not fans of that particular film. We are not necessarily going to talk about Crazy Rich Asians because that is a movie that is very, very popular, has crossed into the mainstream vernacular. We are also not going to necessarily be discussing things like Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. Again, Matt and Ben talked about that movie as part of There Will Be Movies. But what we are going to be doing is we are going to be going back in time. We are going to be leaving the country, and we are going to be talking about 4 Hong Kong releases from the early first 10 years, I would say, of Michelle Yeoh's career as a leading lady. All of these are very action-oriented, hence the Punchy Kicky nickname. We're also going to be talking about some of our frustrations with finding the right dubs, the perhaps correct versions of these various movies. Our first movie tonight, we are going to be discussing the 1985 release of the movie Yes, Madam. And this is regarded as Michelle Yeoh's very first leading role. She had done a couple of movies prior to this, but this is the first time that she has been as a lead performer. So that is definitely a big deal. And Brian, is of course my co-host, mentioned where you can follow him on Twitter earlier. Brian, are you excited to embark on this journey of talking about Michelle Yeoh's career?
Yeah, especially like looking at like films from this era, especially before like Britain like left Hong Kong. Like for some reason, like that moment in time kind of changed. It feel like all the I don't know, the movies coming out of China at that time. It felt like Hong Kong was doing its own thing. China was kind of doing its own thing, and the Hong Kong movies were just kicking ass because they were having this much more Americanized touch to it, more freedom, better action sequences, better stunts. And you saw that with like the Jackie Chan stuff in the 80s, early mid 90s. Like, if you watched like the Jackie Chan push in the 90s when they were pushing like Jackie Chan's First Strike, Rumble in the Bronx, which led to Rush Hour and all that stuff. That was like the last point of that era, I would say. And then this is kind of the height of it in the 80s, where like in this same year we got Jackie Chan's Police Story, which is incredible. If you've never seen that, we can talk. We're going to talk about that next week for Police Story 3, Super Cop. But for this movie, it came out the same year, and the stunts and the choreography are so on point. The colors are so on point. So I love this era of like Hong Kong, like martial arts, kung fu, whatever you want to call it, filmmaking. This is kind of like the after the Shaw Brothers era where they did all those kung fu movies in the 60s and 70s, and like focusing on like crime stories like this. And it really works because the kind of stories that they were kind of telling with these police stories at the time has that Lethal Weapon feel where they're kind of balancing the comedy with the action. So I'm really excited because we're going to watch a lot of that style with when Michelle Yeoh's movies coming up, because we're basically going from like 1985 to, I'd say, 94. which is like right around that perfect time period of the movies we're going to watch from her. And this first one, Yes, Madam, is like really all about that. Like I especially loved like just because it was also the 80s and like they have these bright, neon like color schemes and like the blues are just incredibly like so rich in 1985, like that blue suit she's wearing in the movie. So I really love this movie. The plot's not that great. I think the plot doesn't have enough focus on Michelle Yeoh's character and the other lead actress as well. It kind of goes into some like weird comedy stuff through halfway through the middle, but I would say like for her first lead, this was great, and I can't wait to watch more of her stuff because I've been kind of pushing for a movie called Heroic Trio for the superhero Pantheon, but we never quite got to it because we were trying to plan like a foreign films month, but it never kind of came to be. So finally, in the next couple of weeks, we're going to watch that. So I'm excited for that as well because that's like, a superhero version of what we're seeing now. Instead of like a crime drama, it's a superhero fantasy with that action stunts and the stunts they come up with and the choreography. I'm excited for that because that's going to look spectacular. But for this movie, I dug it a lot. And man, I watched a completely different version than Jerome did. Jerome rented it, and he got the proper version, which is the original Cantonese. I got the free version on Prime, which was like this weird dub. And looking at at the IMDb trivia, no wonder I was so confused. The beginning of my version had a completely different opening that was ripped from a completely different movie that was attached to the beginning of this dub version. So very, very weird stuff because like the beginning of my version that I watch has a cross-dressing guy stabbing people in a building, and then he gets chased by the cops, and they end up on this like racetrack, and they just crash into this side part of the racetrack. Just crazy stuff, and it had nothing to do with the movie. And I was like, "What the fuck is this?" And then I look it up. It's from another Sammo Hung movie. Who he was like the choreographer for the stunts on this movie. Sammo Hung is another famous martial artist, movie star choreographer from China. Teamed up with a lot with Jackie Chan in the 80s. But that beginning of what I saw was from a different movie called Where's Officer Tuba, and that's like another comedy cop movie that they made. But I don't know what the hell, who made that decision, because like it's still on Amazon, and there's no note on Amazon Prime that says, hey, this is like the dub version where the beginning is like a completely different movie from the actual movie. And then, of course, Jerome rents the movie and gets the original Cantonese version, and you got a completely different opening with a guy's dick being closed with a book.
Yeah, it's really strange that we basically did watch the same movie. The beginning, I believe, is the only part that is different. But of course, so I am a firm believer that, especially when it comes to live action, if I can watch the movie in its original intended language, then that is what I'm going to do. Unfortunately, I was not able to find a dubbed version of Super Cop in the original Cantonese. So I did actually watch an English dub, which I was not happy about. And we'll talk about that next week. But in terms of Yes, Madam, again, I'm a firm believer. I wanted to watch this in Cantonese. The transfer that I rented was pretty good too, I will say. It's certainly not 4K, but it did look very, very good. It definitely looked like it was cleaned up. I believe there is a physical release for this movie that recently came out that I believe is looking really excellent. I know the Alamo Drafthouse also recently played this movie as part of its kind of repertory screenings. So Yes, Madam has been in the zeitgeist a little bit, and undoubtedly that is because of Michelle Yeoh's recent awards run, which is obviously a big deal because this is the first time that she's really gotten this kind of credibility on the acting level. I think she's somebody that is extremely well respected for her work in Hong Kong action movies. And if you look at her IMDb, you will see a wide range in quality. You will also see just a wide range in genre. She is somebody who has been in big blockbusters like Tomorrow Never Dies, Guardians of the Galaxy, Crazy Rich Asians. She's also been in animated movies. I mean, she was in a Minions movie, for God's sakes. Also in Kung Fu Panda 2. We also could look at her career and see how many TV shows she's done. She was a part of the Witcher Origin series. She is also going to be a part of a Disney Plus series as well coming up later this year. So Michelle Yeoh has basically done it all. But let's go back to the beginning of her career. Essentially, she was crowned Miss Malaysia in 1982. She appeared in a couple of movies after that, but this was kind of her first real big opportunity. She won. She kind of got cast in a small role because of her work with Jackie Chan in a commercial, and then this role in the commercial caught the attention of a film production company called D&B. D&B is the one that pulled out all the stops in terms of putting together some of these movies. Yeoh had previously played small roles in the movie that Brian mentioned, Sammo Hung's Owl vs. Dumbo and Twinkle Twinkle Lucky Stars. And for this role, she basically turned to doing a lot of her own stunt work and not really allowing a double for any of it. And I think it shows. And boy, does it get crazy. She was working out in the gym for 8 hours a day. She stated that both she and her co-star in this movie, Cynthia Rothrock, did not want the film to be too hardcore. They said they wanted this to be a family movie. I'm not sure if I necessarily agree with the assertion that this was a family movie, especially because there's a rather dark ending. There's some blood. There's a lot of a lot of glass that gets broken in this, some blood. So I'm not sure if this is a family movie.
Well, I don't know. Different cultures, different times. I kind of get what she's saying because there was no PG-13, right? When did Temple of Doom come out? Yeah, I don't think there was a PG-13 rating. Well, I don't know, at least not in China. I think it was just like, general and then probably banned or whatever. But yeah, this was kind of that in-between period with the PG-13 rating. And I see what she's saying because, like, it does, like, if I watched this when I was 5, like, even the dub version, I think I would have liked it a lot just as much. Because I feel like that third act really, like, that house sequence, which we're talking about soon, that really was the highlight. And if I would have watched that as a kid, I think I would have rewound that and just watched that part over and over and over because that was the best part. And you mentioned that she's doing in her own stunts. And I wanted to mention like a little note that Jackie Chan kind of emphasizes when he does his stunts or choreography. He wants long wide shots so that way you can see that it is the actor that is doing the thing or whatever stunt. And he's like the king of that. And a lot of his stunts are wide shots and wide angles. You can see that it's actually Jackie Chan. And in this case, they did the same thing. And Michelle Yeoh is just like kicking ass all over the place. And you can tell it's her. There's no stunt double. If there was a stunt double, I didn't notice. Even the parts where she's drop kicking people and you text to be like, she's got the best drop kick and one of the best drop kicks you've ever seen. And I'm like looking at this drop kick like, yeah, this would have like impressed some people in the business for sure. Because I don't know I don't know if they did the trampoline gimmick where she gets that height. It had to be a trampoline. And she just gets on the air and just does this drop kick that's like, I don't know. I guess you can say like Randy Orton, but it's not even that. It's like so vertical high in the air that it's almost like a video game and it's actually her. So it's just spectacular that what she was able to do physically for this role. Like, even the stuff that Jackie Chan does, like, I think she does it almost just as well because her body is, like, really, like, she doesn't have a lot of fat in her body, so she's able to move around a lot. So in the beginning of the movie when she's doing that armored car chase gimmick and she's moving around the car and she's getting, like, almost shot through the car, but it just looks spectacular because she's actually doing it. And then when Cynthia Rothrock comes on screen as well, she's actually doing the stunts too, and she's kicking ass. And she's like the first time you see her, like she's beating up this criminal in the airport, and she's wearing the skirt, and it's like I don't know how she pulled it off with that skirt on, but yeah, like 3 days of filming is what the notes say, and yeah, that certainly took some time, but I just really was impressed with their performances, not like in terms of acting, but just like the physicality, and the stoicness, and especially them acting like badasses and like giving themselves high fives before the battle at the end. I thought that was the coolest part of the movie was when they gave each other fives and like, let's go. And that was so awesome.
I mean, a scene is going to be good when they're high-fiving before it even starts.
I know. I was like, can we get more of this in like today's fighting sequences? Like, I know John Wick is cool and all, but it would have been cool if him and Halle Berry in the third one were like high-fiving each other before a fight sequence, and I think the audience would have just lost it. But I think we need more of that fun element in fight sequences nowadays that I think is kind of missing. But I don't know, because like it's just a different time, a different era, because especially this movie was trying to be part comedy, part action, and a lot of those movies were trying to do that as well. Even Police Story movies, which were kind of serious, But yeah, I really appreciated that, and I think they did a great job, especially towards the end. And in terms of like the dialogue, even one of the notes said that Cynthia Rock just like flubbed the line, and because it's dubbed, or like they're dubbing the lines later because it's so old school in the '80s the way they were doing it, they were able to cover up any like messed up lines, so they could just kind of focus on the action. So I think you can't even do that nowadays, to kind of focus just on the action and worry about the dialogue later. But I know that sounds absurd, but like that was just the time for what it was and what they were doing in filmmaking.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, even the Cantonese version that I watched clearly was dubbed because the what their mouths were saying, it wasn't matching what their mouths were doing. So it's a very different way of approaching things. And again, I don't think that is necessarily as acceptable. Like, I don't know how people on Netflix watch like these Korean dramas in English. Like, it does not compute, because in my mind, the subtitles are right there, like, and they're really well done for the most part. So I find it absurd. Cynthia Rothrock is not somebody that we are probably ever going to talk about again. So this is a really good chance for us to discuss her background. She has a heavy martial arts background, and she really hasn't done a lot of movies or TV since this, which is kind of unfortunate, because I think she's very charismatic, and I would have loved to have seen her and Michelle Yeoh do like a series of these kinds of movies where they're kind of a cop duo. So it's unfortunate that we did not get to see more of these two as a duo, especially since her acting wasn't necessarily going to be the focus. So she was discovered in a magazine called Inside Kung Fu. I guess originally they were looking for a male lead to go alongside Michelle Yeoh, but eventually they settled on Cynthia Rothrock. The producers were impressed with her skills, and they offered her the role in the film on the spot and changed the lead from a male to female. And Rothrock was surprised of her role, as she assumed she was going to be in a traditional period martial arts film, and as it turns out, this was very much going to be kind of a modern examination of that. And of course, she had some difficulties adjusting to the life of an actor, and she was flubbing lines, and they were letting it go through because it doesn't matter, because they're recording all of the dialogue afterward. And that is definitely something that went quite a long time. And she is the first Caucasian woman to play lead in a Hong Kong film, so I feel like that is pretty significant. And she also got introduced to the woolly side of it, as one of the actors, Dick Y, kicked her so hard in the side of the head that she began bleeding from her ear. At the hospital, a torn inner ear was diagnosed. And of course, she immediately returned to filming, because she is tough, and she is not a coward, Brian. She's just going to go right back to filming.
Yeah, she's a badass in this movie. I wonder if she had a manager at the time, what the manager was thinking with her career in the future, because she doesn't really do much after this. But yeah, you're right. Like, because if you look on Wikipedia and look at the series of movies that followed, they're called the In the Line of Duty films. Like, in the version I watched, mine was called In the Line of Duty 2, even though it's the first one. Again, these weird fucking dubs, and they screwed these titles up. But there was like 8 more movies in the Line of Duty series, and she wasn't in any of them, which is kind of like weird. Donnie Yen was in one of them, but I don't know. I don't know if they use this series as a launching pad for up and coming stars, and they didn't want to make it the focus just on Michelle Yeoh and Cynthia Rothrock. Maybe that was the idea, like, because in the next movie it's like a totally different set of starring people, and then it kind of jumps to like different starring roles each movie. So yeah, that's probably what it was. I think this is more of like each movie is going to be a different lead, which kind of sucks, because this was like a perfect like launching point for a series, especially with the ending. That ending was like, they get in trouble. Like, there's no like happy ending to this movie. They get in trouble for going to the dude's house and kind of breaking in illegally and getting in trouble for that. So there could have been more movies of them together, but they didn't do that. So I was just kind of like, yeah, I kind of get why, but it's unfortunate because I felt it was a missed opportunity.
All right, I know you're going to want to hear about this. So the film score was done by Romeo Diaz. Diaz worked with the director of this movie a number of times. and then includes some other things. But the score also featured parts of a very familiar soundtrack. Brian, what film was that?
I thought it was Halloween 2, but it's actually Halloween the original. Yeah, I don't know who got the rights for this, even if they even asked John Carpenter. If they never asked him, sorry, dude, you lost out. They used parts of the score of Halloween for some of the bad guys, and I was just like, what the fuck is going on here? Like, I thought I was like, I don't know, I thought it was like maybe this dub was like the wrong version again or something, and this is like a fan version or something. And I look it up, and no, it's both versions. It's like they use the shape music, dun 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 dun. Yeah, yeah. I know my Halloween music. As soon as I heard that, I texted Jerome, and yeah, my mind was blown. Totally, and just like, how did this happen? Who allowed it legally? Can people just do this where they can go to another country, make a different movie, and use the Halloween soundtrack for their action movie? Because that just blew up it just made all these possibilities in my head happen. Like, God, could you imagine Police Story with some of the Halloween music in it? So look, I feel bad for John Carpenter if he never knew this happened. Sorry. Maybe just don't tell the guy because it's way past the deadline on that one. But yeah, just craziness, and I loved it because they actually used it well. You know what I mean? Like they didn't just use it for the sake of using it. It actually worked because there were some scenes where some of the bad guys were popping out of the shadows, and you hear the shape music, and I'm like, is Michael Myers coming? What's going on? And then it's the bad guy. So I guess it worked. It's just like, man, legally, what's going on here? What is going on here legally?
So let's talk about the director for a second. Corey Yuen is how he is probably best known in the United States. And the thing is that if you look at his Wikipedia and his IMDb, he is listed as having a couple of names that he is referred to in China and other countries. So that's kind of how you have to treat it. Sometimes they will Americanize their names. But he is a director that you should probably know about because not only did he direct this movie, but he also served as the action director and kind of a consultant on films such as Lethal Weapon 4, which is kind of fitting, the 2000 movie X-Men, which I find to be really interesting, plus a number of Jet Li's American movies, Romeo Must Die, Kiss of the Dragon, The One, Cradle to the Grave, War, and of course, The Expendables. So Corey Yuen is somebody who is very, very notable. And before we get into our discussion of the plot of this movie, I just wanted to mention that. So there is a direct connection between this movie and Lethal Weapon.
Yeah, that's just very strange considering that this was like a Lethal Weapon feel. And this came out before Lethal Weapon, I think, right? Because Lethal Weapon was 87.
3 or 4 years beforehand.
Yeah, so they were onto something there. And I know not a lot of people love Lethal Weapon 4. I like it a lot. I laugh my ass off all the time with Chris Rock in it and all that stuff. Yeah, I don't know why Lethal Weapon 4 and 3 like really like stick with me more than like 2 and 1, which I know it sounds crazy, but maybe because I watched it later on and I watched those kind of firsthand before the first two. I don't know. But I have seen the one in theaters, I think on opening day, and I remember that movie a lot. I never saw Cradle to the Grave. I saw War, and I've seen The Expendables. So I guess this guy's had more of an influence on me than I realized because I've seen a lot of his work in terms of his action choreography. But it kind of makes sense because, I mean, if you look at the choreography in this movie, it's very clean. And it's no wonder like America brought him over to kind of work on their movies because you can kind of tell like thinking about it now, like especially like The One, a movie like The One, as ridiculous as that movie is with all the multiverse versions of Jet Li. I remember a lot of the stunts in that movie, and it worked really well. So credit to him, because that movie had nothing going for it but the stunts and action and sequences in that movie. So I kind of get where he was doing with that.
Absolutely. So let's get into this movie. Brian, there are two things I want to point out about this right from the start. The first thing is that this movie has both a MacGuffin and a Chekhov's gun. So let's talk about the MacGuffin. The MacGuffin in this case is a piece of microfilm that could potentially do damage to the main villain of this piece. And I think what's so interesting about this is that you do have James Tien performing as Henry Tin. Kind of all he needed was a mustache to twirl because that's kind of how evil he is. and he apparently is kind of making a deal and that's kind of the impetus for the entire plot. Is it's kind of a deal between a group in Scotland as well as Hong Kong. What I think is interesting is that Cynthia Rothrock, as Senior Inspector Carrie Morris, I believe she is intended to be Scottish, right? That's the whole idea.
I think so, because she's from Scotland Yard. But again, it's, like, whatever. They can pick whatever accent they want for the dub, because the dub was like an American woman. So it wasn't like a Scottish accent. So from the version that I watched.
The thing that's wild to me about all of this is that even though she is Scottish, I think that her behavior and her mannerisms, they feel very Americanized because of how aggressive and emotional she is. So this feels like the equivalent of like stereotyping in some way and just treating all Westerners as the same.
That's pretty much it. And if you kind of noticed in some of the police story movies or like the Jackie Chan movies where they got the random white dude in the background playing like a higher authority figure, yeah, that's kind of the trope. And in this case, they kind of just avoided the whole Scottish accent thing and just made her a kick-ass Americanized version of that, which is fine. I don't even know why they mentioned Scotland Yard. Like, I would have done, I don't know, just put American FBI or something. That would have made more sense. But yeah, I don't know if it's the Hong Kong thing as well. Like, I'm not entirely sure what the politics are in Hong Kong right now before Britain left in 98 or whatever, 97. So I don't know if that has anything to do with the connection to Scotland Yard or whatnot. But yeah, for some reason, they just had to put Scotland Yard in there.
Yeah, for sure. So there was a lot of focus on the three of the petty thieves, and they're kind of they are very Three Stooges like in my mind. I'm talking about, of course, John Shum as Strepsil, Mang Hoi as Aspirin, and Sui Hark as Panadol. We get a lot of scenes in the apartment. We got one of the better action scenes, I would say, involving Panadol. It's just this incredible sequence with he and one of Tin's primary henchmen. It's the speed in which they're moving sometimes is just incredible, and the fact that it's like one take, it really boggles the mind. So we get a lot of focus on these villains and these thieves, and part of the adjustment that you have to make with watching a movie like this is just how different it is from an Americanized movie, because I think in an American movie, all of the focus would be on Senior Inspector Nig as well as Carrie Morris, but in this case, you are getting some of what the women are going through, but you're also getting a lot of focus on what the thieves are doing with hiding the microfilm, playing with the guns, owing people money. Just they're bringing a lot of the comedy into this movie, and I have very mixed feelings because obviously it does have a payoff with the ending of the movie, but part of me just wanted to watch Michelle Yeoh and Cynthia Rothrock kick people's asses. So I have very conflicting feelings on their role in this movie.
Same thing. I had the same thing or the same thought about him as the Three Stooges. Like, that was the first, because especially one of them is doing like the curly bit to the point where his hair is almost exactly like Curly. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of my weaknesses, or my major weakness of this movie too, is like they focus too much on them. And I would have cut out some scenes and just kind of, again, more scenes of, Michelle Yeoh and Cynthia Rothrock kicking ass, because that's kind of what the best part of that movie was. And I get that they need to have this, darker story, the grittiness of the story to it, mixed with the comedy. And, there is some dark stuff in that story with the three of them and like in terms of trust and friendship and all that kind of thing. But I just felt like it was too much. Like, I felt like we were just focusing too much on them. And I don't know if they just kind of like ran out of things to shoot for the other two. And they were like, I guess we got to focus more on them now and kind of fill in the blanks. But I mean, there was some cool sequences. Like the one you mentioned, I think, is with the apartment scene where like he's got part of the cage set up in his apartment, and the guy's trying to get through the cage. And every time the guy tries to go and get him, like there's some part of the cage that kind of breaks off and traps him in the apartment, and that was pretty fucking cool. Like that was just really, really well done, especially for a small like set to do that. Like it takes a lot of patience to film these sequences, and that's what Jackie Chan says. Like, it's not necessarily the accuracy of what you're doing. It's more of like the patience of doing 100 takes to get it right. And that's what it pretty much was. And I can only imagine how many takes that specific scene took with the apartment. I mean, it looked good. It's just I felt like, man, let's just kind of go back to the girls, like let's go back to what they're doing. but they did a lot of focus on I'm gonna call them the Three Stooges. And then they had this little other subplot too with like this pool player that was hustling for money. That was like, I think this is totally unnecessary too. So I would have cut that out.
I mean, I do think you get a decent action scene involving the pool players in the second.
It does look
second
cool,
part.
but it's just like it had nothing to do with the actual, even the bad guys. Like it was a totally separate bad guy from the other bad guys. So I don't know if it was just filler or what they were trying to do, but I felt like you could have cut at least 10 minutes of their story out and replaced it with 10 minutes for the girls. But I don't know. I just, it feels like they ran out of stuff for the girls to do, and then they just had to fill in time with the other guy. I don't know. That's kind of what it feels like to me. And I think it's like one credited story writer, so I don't know if they had rewrites during the shoot or whatnot, but it felt like they were trying to fill in up until the end where the big action sequences were going to happen in the house. But I did like I mean, they did have a good chemistry, the three guys, because they were very much doing the Three Stooges thing. But I felt like, man, for the story they're trying to tell right now, I don't know if they're trying to do too much comedy. And that's kind of where you have to find that balance, especially with these like action Hong Kong movies that are like police movies, but they're trying to also do comedy. You got to find that right balance. And I think they kind of went too much in the other direction.
So it is funny to me. So I watched this the same week of the Poker Face episode where a piece of film is also important. So it's just funny how the timing worked out on that. But this piece of microfilm, I guess, contains details of a group of criminals involved in the illegal activities, most notably the businessman who is the aforementioned Mr. Tin. Brian, I just love the idea that there is either a file, a thumb drive, a piece of microfilm that literally just has a list of all of the villains. And with this piece of microfilm, you can literally just arrest everyone and put everyone in jail. I love that idea. I mean, even The Dark Knight has something like this as well. It's just you get that list and you're able to get everyone.
Also, The Untouchables with the accountant. What else? I'm trying to think all the other of this trope, like of the other movies that have done this. Like, there's been a lot of movies that have done this. And what did Dark Knight call it? The Rico statue or whatever,
Yeah,
which I think is a real thing.
You get them with the Rico.
That's a real thing, right? That they developed in the 80s, 90s to capture all the
Rico,
criminals.
that is how you bust people. I mean, that's how Al Capone was busted, for God's sakes, was because of tax evasion and Rico related crimes. I mean, that's how you get the mafia. You're not going to get the mafia for murder. You're going to get them for financial crimes. And that tends to be what happens in these situations, is that people go away for Rico.
Yeah. And Mr. Tin is desperate to get it back. And I don't know why they didn't make a copy of the film. I don't know if they never thought of that, but they made like fake copies of the film, which I was like, okay, that's fine, but did you make actual copies of the real thing? And apparently they didn't do that, which I thought was stupid, and that kind of plays into the ending, which sucks because it leads towards a darker ending. But if they just made a few copies of the actual real piece of film, I don't think that ending happens. But again, we're talking about these Three Stooges type characters that probably didn't think their way through it. Even though one of them is like really smart and he fakes passports. That's the guy in the apartment. But yeah, it was just so strange to me. Like, why didn't you make actual copies of the film instead of making fake copies? But again, you don't really think things out when you write a script like this. You just kind of want things to fall into place.
All right, I think we have to talk about the action scenes, just because I think they are easily the strength and kind of the heart of this movie. The first one that I want to talk about is the one that takes place at the airport, and I think what makes this one so notable is we get to see the drop kick for the first time from Michelle Yeoh, credited as Michelle Khan. And this scene, my God, it's pretty incredible. Just the way that it starts. So you have somebody trying to get through the airport and trying to kind of fake his way through with this passport. The name of the actor is Eddie Marr, and he is just trying to kind of get his way through there, and then he gets into a fight. He gets into fighting with both Inspector Ning and Inspector Morris, and it's just, they go all over the airport. Glass is breaking. There's a lot of glass breaking in this scene, but just, I mean, you get a real taste for how good this was. And I think in a lot of movies, this would actually be like the center action piece but then somehow they managed to top it. The final 10 minutes of this movie is just bombastic, nonstop action, all kinds of kind of there's, mini bosses and things of that nature. And just the way that Norris and Nick move around, it's so impressive. And I think those are the two scenes that really stand out in my mind. And I think it's what really elevates this movie into something that I would say is pretty important to watch in terms of understanding the history of Hong Kong filmmaking, as well as Michelle Yeoh's career. I think that planes, the scene at the airport, as well as the final scene, that is the heart and soul of this movie.
Okay, so let's talk about the airport scene. Okay. You know how hard it is to jump over a chair? Like, really fucking hard. You have to be an athlete to do that, because that's the kind of shit they're doing in track races where they're jumping over that hurdle, right? So, and there's a part of this sequence where you got, I don't know, 10 cops chasing the one dude, and the one dude's jumping over the chairs in the middle of the lobby of the airport, and he does it over, like, I don't know, 3 or 4 chairs, and you got people behind him doing the same thing. And again, I mentioned this idea that Jackie Chan kind of implements in his action sequences that they took here. A lot of wide shots. You do a lot of wide shots, and it becomes so spectacular because you're actually seeing the actor do the stunt. Now, this guy's running towards the camera, and he's jumping over these chairs, and I keep thinking, like, dude, if he fucking hits one chair, he's done. He's going to be fucking done. Because I've seen some crazy fucking videos of, like, things in nature where, like, fucking deer try to jump over a barbed wire fence, and that shit does not go well, and the deer breaks his neck. Imagine a guy like jumping over a chair at this speed, and the speed they did it at, and multiple chairs, and not only that, avoiding like crowds of people sitting on the. Oh my god, that part of it really got me, because I was like, Jesus Christ, how hard is that to do? Because that had to have taken like 50 takes just for everyone to not get their head kicked when they're jumping over the chairs, and to get everyone cleanly jumping over the chairs, and not just the main guy in the front of the frame, but in the background you got the guys chasing them, and they got to clear the chairs too. So man, that was just like, wow. There was no CGI, because if they did that today, the chairs would be CGI. Like, I guarantee the chairs would be CGI. That way you don't have any chance of anyone getting kicked, like tripping their foot off and then breaking their neck on the fucking ground. So that was just like, wow. Like, and then of course the drop kick, which was, again, I think she had to have come off a fucking trampoline. There's no way she got that height. But if she didn't need a trampoline, damn. But it looked like she had a trampoline to get that air, because I mean, it almost looks like a Nike logo the way she went through the air. So that was fucking dope. And then we talk about the last 10 minutes. So this is what happens. They kind of like follow the Three Stooges, because the Three Stooges have the microfilm, and they're trying to get their friend back or whatever. Or they're trying to get some kind of compensation, and things go awry. So both the inspectors end up at the house of Mr. Tin, and it's kind of like breaking and entering, which I think it was, and that's why after the big fight, they get arrested for pretty much breaking and entering the dude's house. But the fight sequence itself was just so awesome, and I think I've probably seen a documentary or two about like this era of like movies in Hong Kong, probably when I was like in high school or something. And I do remember I do remember Michelle Yeoh doing the glass thing where she swings through the glass and drags 2 dudes underneath and throws them to the first floor. Like, I distinctly remember seeing that before. Like, God, I remember seeing that before. So I had to have seen clips of this fight sequence before in some documentary or something. But it was just like, you mentioned the mini boss aspect, and which I love when, because like, again, that's kind of like that side scroller beat 'em up thing that I love of like that era of video games. Like, I love the new Ninja Turtles game, which is like, exactly like that, with the mini bosses and the side fighting scrolling and all that. And this is pretty much what that was. And each woman got their shine. Like, they kicked ass in both separate parts of the house, and they did a spectacular job. And like, I don't know how they did some of the things they did. Like, at one point, Cynthia Rothrock does splits on the wall. Like, I don't know how she even did that. Like, was she standing on something? Did they turn the wall on its side and film it from the opposite angle? You know what I mean? Like, it's just a lot of like craziness. And then I mentioned that glass spot, and there's a lot of glass spots in this sequence. And then, yeah, man, and then just the fact that like they were using the swords as well and incorporating that. I love it when, like, this is what happens in Jackie Chan movies too, is like when they take the set piece and use the things around it as part of the fight. So you'll see the set like before everyone starts fighting, and like, okay, you can kind of see things sticking out, and it's like, okay, something's gonna happen there, something's gonna happen there, this glass is gonna break, and you can kind of see it before it happens. And then once everything starts happening, you're like, okay, they're actually using the set around them. The set wasn't just designed randomly; it was designed for a purpose, and they're using those objects as part of the fight. And that's what I love about this era of like martial arts movies, kung fu movies, like police dramas like this from this era. They do that well because they kind of show you for a brief second this wide shot of the set, and then once the fight starts breaking down, you'll start noticing those parts of the set were designed specifically because they're going to use that as a weapon later on.
Absolutely. And we also, I love that we have a gun that's put away. So at one point, it is alleged that Panadol apparently had provided some fake guns to some associates, and they bring a real gun, and he stashes the real gun away with this group of fake ones. And in the end, one of the characters, I forget if I believe it's Strepsol, who comes to attack, and they have the fake guns and the real guns. Like, he's got a bunch of guns with him, and he keeps shooting off fake ones. Finally discovers and gets the real one off. And wouldn't you know it, Brian, not only does this real gun pay off in that moment, but then at the very, very end, like the last scene of this movie, is Strepsol or is Aspirin shooting Mr. Tin, because Mr. Tin, there is not going to be justice. The microfilm is gone, but Aspirin takes justice into his own hands by shooting Mr. Tin in the back. A very, very dark ending for a movie that, again, I think is a mixed bag. But to me, the scene at the airport and the scene and this final sequence, it makes this a must watch, I would say. Again, even if this movie has a lot of plot problems and a lot of flaws, like the 25 or so minutes of those two scenes make the rest of it worth it. But boy, oh boy, is the ending dark.
Yeah, so the reason he shoots the bad guy at the end, because the bad guy wasn't arrested, because the film is destroyed. There's no evidence. They can't arrest him, right? They can only arrest Michelle Yeoh and Cynthia Rothreich because they broke into his house, and he's charging them with breaking in. So it's like, wow, they're going to go with a dark ending. The good guys are getting arrested. And then once they find out, the Three Stooges characters, once they find out what one of their friends was killed, that's when the guys, like, just, you can tell, I knew he was going to grab a gun and shoot him, because there was this look in his eye that, like, I don't care anymore. Like, I don't care anymore. I want vengeance for my friend. And you know where I've seen that look before? Do you ever watch Law & Order SVU?
I haven't watched Law & Order SVU in a while.
So have you heard of that famous Kyle MacLachlan episode where he shoots the kid in front of the cops?
Yes, I absolutely yes.
This is the exact same thing. And when I saw the look in the dude's eyes in this movie, I was like, he's got the Kyle MacLachlan eyes. He's going to fucking get a gun and just shoot him because he doesn't give a shit. And that's exactly what he did, man. So I like that ending a lot because, A, it's not a happy ending. B, it is a satisfying ending because the bad guy does die, and then these offshoot criminals are going to go to jail for what they did. But I don't think they're going to go to jail for as long as they think they are, because I'm sure the cops are going to come up with something to kind of reward them for what he did, because you can tell the cops did want to arrest Mr. Tin, but they had no evidence. So with that going on, you can't really arrest the guy. But now that the guy's dead, it's like, okay, he's dead. Now we can kind of move on, but maybe we kind of get these guys off with a lighter sentence because they did the job that we couldn't do. That's kind of the interpretation I'm getting, because in the Law & Order SVU episode, I think in the follow-up episode, he got away with it, right? Like, he pleaded his case that, like, it was, I don't know, temporary insanity or whatnot, but he got away with shooting the kid because the kid was like a sociopath or whatever, psychopath that killed another neighbor kid, and he got away with it. So he was just like, I'm not going to let this kid kill again. So he got a gun and shot the kid. Exactly what happens in this movie. And I really like that because, like, I don't know. I don't know if I've seen this elsewhere, but I was like, he's doing the Kyle MacLachlan, man. And it really paid off well. I felt like that was like his arc, because that guy was kind of like a goofball, right? He stole at the hotel. He stole the microfilm on accident. He's just kind of like this petty criminal. And once he realized his friend was dead, he was like, that's it. I have to kill this guy. And he kills the guy, and he has this completely different look on his face than he did in the previous 90 minutes of the movie. And I was like, that's his arc. And that they're done. Their arc is done. They killed the bad guy. The inspectors might not have got the W, but the bad guy is dead at the end.
It's a good thing Aspen didn't have jealous eyes. Otherwise, the Macho Man would attack him in the bowels of the Bradley Center.
Oh, boy. Jealous eyes. The jealous eyes. Oh, boy. WrestleMania 5 all over again.
Yeah. Which this 1985 would be the same year as the first WrestleMania. But I would say that, again, in looking at the strengths of this movie, I mean, the two action scenes, I would say are must watch. I really like the performances. I love Cynthia Rothrock's spunk. I love that she kind of brings an attitude to this. We didn't mention this scene yet, but she has a fantastically terrible. It's terrible in the portrayal because she's a cop and she's beating the crap out of an alleged criminal in an interrogation room. And at first they're kind of okay with her just beating the crap. And then there's a certain point it feels like, okay, she's crossing the line. We should probably stop her before she kills her. So very much enjoying Cynthia Rothrock. And Michelle Yeoh, I think she's very, very good in this role as well. It's tough to tell with a dubbed performance, but just the action scenes alone, I mean, it's pretty great. I love the grunginess of the sets, the police department, the airport, the house, the kind of the mansion at the end. Just really great settings for a lot of great action scenes. And you even get, I think you get a nice variety here because, you know, the airport is kind of a tight squeeze at times, but there's enough open space to run around. The apartment is very tight. The house, they have a lot of room to move, and there's a lot of stairs. I love the use of glass. I don't know. I guess some deathmatch wrestlers watched this movie, perhaps and took inspiration. But great use of that glass and just breaking it constantly. I think the villains are kind of cartoonish in a good way. Anything to add to the strengths? Anything you disagree on?
I think we're on the same page. I guess we got to mention Mr. Tin's henchman. I forget his actual name in the movie, but that's the one.
So he is referred to in the credits as Willie, played by Dick Y.
Okay.
That's how
I'm
referring
really
to
good. He was really good. And I can see why that they use the Halloween shape music for him, because it was the scenes that he was like attacking people, I think. When he would just show up, he would just play the Halloween music. He did a good job for what he was. And you talk about the Chekhov's gun setup. He was the one that ends up getting shot because the guy kept going through all his guns. Like, shit, fake gun. And then he finally got to the last gun and he's like, that's not real. And then he shoots him and it was real. And then he shoots him again. So that was great. A great setup and a great payoff to that Chekhov's gun moment. And Willie did a good job, man, because he had this look on his face that like he was willing to kill anyone at any moment in time. And that's the look of a badass, and that's what you need for a movie like this.
Absolutely. So the weaknesses, I mean, I think we've kind of addressed a lot of them. I think just the bizarre beginning, whether you're getting the English dubbed version or the Cantonese version, the beginnings don't really connect with the rest of the movie. Neither one. I mean, I guess mine did in some ways because at least it was Michelle Yeoh involved in it, but it's really weird. Again, too much focus on the villains. The ending is a bit out of nowhere. So I think for me to give this like an 8, I think the weaknesses are just too much to overcome. So I'm settling in at about a 7 or a 7.5. What about you?
That's where I'm kind of at right now. I want to say a 7, just because I felt like we had too much time focused on the Three Stooges characters, and I wanted more of the other two. But again, it did pay off with that ending, I guess, if they were having all that focus on them, for him to be the one to pull out the gun and then shoot Mr. Tin, I guess that makes sense. But I felt like it was more of they focused more on them, even though it was Michelle Yeoh and Cynthia Rothrock's movie, and that's kind of where I'm at. I wish they would have swapped out 10 to 15 minutes of their stuff for their stuff.
All right, my MVP is the director, Corey Yuen, just getting the action together, just putting this all together. I think you've got to give the fact that he goes on to be an action director for so many American movies, I think speaks to the fact that he really deserves the MVP for this movie because of how good the action is. So he is my MVP. And again, it's Michelle Yeoh's month. So this award is going to be heavily skewed in her favor. I am going to give it to Michelle Yeoh, of course.
We're both in agreement. And I guess you got to shout out to Sammo Hung because he's the producer, I believe, and then also some of the other stunts. Not all the stunts, but some of the stunts and choreography, because that's his job. Like him and Jackie Chan were working on movies together beforehand. So, and if you've never seen Sammo Hung in real life, you'll be surprised because that dude is like my size, even bigger, and pulling off these crazy kung fu martial arts moves and stunts and all these kind of things. And he does his own stunts and movies. So credit to him, man. He never gets the love that I think that Jackie Chan gets, or like a Donnie Yen or a Michelle Yeoh, but he's kind of been there in the background, kind of like, doing his thing and kind of like influencing other people as well. So credit to him because I feel like he never gets the shout out he deserves.
For sure. So this leads us to next week, as we are going to be discussing what is technically also considered to be a sequel. This is a sequel in the Police Story franchise. Police Story 1 and 2 are generally regarded to being like two of the greatest action movies in the history of Hong Kong cinema. Of course, Jackie Chan is a prominent part of that. We will be talking about Jackie Chan. We will be talking about Michelle Yeoh entering into this franchise as a new character. In some versions, it is called Police Story 3. You could also call it Super Cop. I will call it Super Cop. That is what we will be discussing next week. And I know that Brian is excited because he finally found a pretext to watch the first two police stories, which are very, very good and very fun. And we will see whether Super Cop is nearly as good as those two. Brian, any final thoughts before we end the show?
I wish they made a sequel to Yes, Madam, and we never got that. It sucks. And I think, again, the reason it is called Yes, Madam is I think it's a translation issue again, because if you look at the poster, I believe the main title on the original poster in Cantonese says In the Line of Duty. But the tagline in English says Yes, Madam. So knowing an American guy who's trying to bring a movie from Hong Kong and doesn't really know the culture well and sees the poster, he's just going to be like, oh, it's called Yes, Madam. And I think that's what happened because at no point in the movie did they ever do the thing where it's like, he said the title of the movie in the movie gimmick. And that never happened. So I'm guessing that was what happened. I think they just took the tagline and misinterpreted it as the title of the movie. And instead of In the Line of Duty, it became Yes, Madam, which happens to a lot of like dub movies. It's just ridiculous. Like I've experienced a lot of this dubbing issue with like the King Kong versus Godzilla movie from 1962, which is like multiple versions of that movie, and I prefer the original, not the American takeover version. And then, of course, there's other Godzilla movies that are like that. And of course, like Stephen Chow movies from like the early 90s that I've watched has that issue as well. I just wish that like they would just, I don't know, give us both and give us a choice. But again, this is the 80s and they didn't really have that kind of choice. And it was just like, we're going to give you one version with a dub on it. And there you go. And that kind of frustrates me. And this is me on my rant right now on dub movies. But man, it just frustrates me going back to as a little kid, because I wish I saw some of those kung fu movies as when I was a little kid in the original. Because like I remember watching the original Cantonese version of was it Three Ninjas? But because Three Ninjas was a remake for America, which people don't even know about. And I remember watching a couple of those movies as a kid, and I was like, damn, I wish I watched it in the original language, because you could tell the English didn't match up with what they were saying. So I was just like, even as a kid, I've always been frustrated with this. So I think the Eureka version, or I don't know if it's Shout Factory or Eureka, but the new version that was just released, I believe, has both. So you can have that option. But again, you always got to go with like subtitles over the dub. It just feels more natural, and you get more of that natural tone and what the context was originally intended to be. So that's me in my soapbox, praising subtitles over dubs.
All right. So for Brian, my name is Jerome. Thank you so much for listening. We will be back again next week.
So really, where is Officer Tuba?